Great. So I'm David Martin. So in the spirit of cooperation that we have within the ECP, Suzy Tichenor and I share co-executive director duties with the Industry Council. So we'll start with the charter. I'm not expecting you to read all this, but the thing to kind of understand about the Industry Council is the real desire on the part of the exascale computing project to involve industrial users up front. And so that, as you've heard from Paul, the project is really getting going, and part of that getting going is getting input from industry. So the Industry Council kind of has two parts. One is an advisory body, so it's not a federal advisory committee in the terms of legally. It's really an advisory committee that serves the ECP director and leadership team. And so the idea is to have a place for industry to be able to give direct input based on where the exascale project is going, where the work is being done. But it's also intended to be a two-way communication. So not only is the advice coming into the ECP project, but we're expecting the Industry Council to talk about what they're doing in high-performance computing and where their needs are, and really make that a two-way street so that when something comes up in the project, Paul and the leadership team can go to the Industry Council members and get input. So I have, you can tell I have very little graphic capabilities. I've got circles and arrows. But the real thing that I want you to see with this is that there's a bidirectional flow between the leadership and the Industry Council. That flow happens in two ways. First, the Industry Council gets briefings from the ECP leadership team regularly, and they can provide feedback on what they hear and direction and suggestions. The other thing is the Industry Council provides use cases and problem sets that they're providing to the ECP leadership, which then the leadership can provide feedback about how the exascale systems and software that are being developed can solve those. So that the two left-hand circles are the ones that we're ramping up right now. Then in addition to that, we're expecting, and the ECP Industry Council has really expressed the desire to provide public information as well around needs for exascale. And so Mike Bernhardt, the ECP Communication Manager, is working on some pretty strong plans to use the Industry Council to really make the connection with the public about how important exascale is. And so the ECP project's excited about that, and the Industry Council is as well. So here's the organization chart. I've added one box there for Industry Council where you can see that we report into Paul and provide input there. We also interface with all of the different focus areas to provide input. So the real idea is that the Industry Council will provide that input at a very high level. And so, Suzy and I are the co-executive directors, so we're paid by ECP to do that. But Michael McQuaid, who is the chair, really has responsibility to keep this all moving. So you can see the organization there. Paul, of course, is at the head of ECP and also of the Industry Council, but the chair is Michael McQuaid from United Technologies. As I mentioned, Suzy and I keep the train running and do the organization and the planning and the documentation of all this. We have then 18 members of the Industry Council. We really work very hard to have people at very senior levels within these companies. So we have a lot of people at the CTO level, the senior fellow level, people who are very comfortable working at the scale that ECP operates in the multi-billion-dollar range, who can give advice and counsel about how to operate projects at that size. So 15 of these are from industry, and we've also included people from the independent software vendor community. The 15 from industry are from U.S. industry. The direction from the Department of Energy was to concentrate on U.S. participation, though a lot of these companies are very large and have operations throughout the world. They are U.S.-based. The members are appointed by Paul for a 2-year term, with the possibility of renewal. And we've asked every one of the members to not only represent their company, but to represent their industry segment. And Suzy will talk about that, about how, how we've broken these up into industry segments. But it was very interesting. The members are very willing to do this. And so they see this as a really important thing for the U.S. competitiveness and are very willing to represent more than just the narrow interests of their company. So, Suzy, you want to go on from here? What?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
As David said, we had a mandate from our DOE managers and from Paul at the ECP leadership to put together a committee that was very broad-based. DOE wanted a lot of input from across industry. Obviously, you can't have everybody on a committee, and so we tried to choose one, in some cases, two companies from a variety of industrial sectors to come in and talk about where high-performance computing is going for their companies, but also that they felt comfortable enough talking broadly about their industry. So this is not just a company representation. This is really coming in to represent their industry. You can see the variety of categories here. By the way, there's, as many of you know, there's no standard way to classify companies. There are SIC codes. We just went to, many companies have multiple SIC codes, so we just went to the Forbes list of companies, and this is how Forbes classifies them. But conglomerates, you have companies like GE and United Technologies, oil and gas, nuclear power, heavy equipment, companies like Cummins and John Deere, air courier, that's how Forbes classifies FedEx. A lot of people don't think of Federal Express as a large high-performance computing user, but they are certainly very large data challenges. They're very interested in this. Household personal care, you have Procter & Gamble, pharmaceuticals, food and drink. We'll show you some logos, a logo screen on the next page. Food and drink, we have Mars. Mars is a large, Mars is a private company, so they're rather quiet about what they do, but they are very large users of high-performance computing and very interested in this. Auto, of course, household appliance. Some of you may know that Whirlpool is a user of high-performance computing in developing their appliances. Chemicals, fusion energy. Fusion energy is very interesting because this is a small company called Trialpha Energy, but as we all know in this community here, large company does not necessarily equate to experienced in high-performance computing, and small company does not necessarily equate to inexperienced. And so while we do have a lot of large companies on here, we do have some small companies too, and they're very savvy and very committed to leadership scale computing. Media with aviation and DreamWorks. And then, as David mentioned, we do have some independent software vendors who are participating. They really don't have an avenue to participate in the exascale computing project right now other than this, whereas the vendors for hardware, as Paul mentioned, have multiple opportunities to participate. So here you can see a number of the companies that we just talked about. What's our cadence? We plan on having 2 meetings a year. We just had one. We'll do a spring and a fall meeting. We had our first meeting a few weeks ago, and then we'll have conference calls in the off quarters, and it's a pretty interactive group. We've already been in touch with them quite a bit with email, and we have regular opportunities for them to communicate with us and to communicate with the focus leaders. Here was the first meeting. We had it at Argonne, and we put in here the second bullet, the tour of the advanced photon source. This is really an opportunity for the Industry Council to become familiar with the labs, a little bit beyond what's happening with exascale computing. So we'll be rotating the meetings around the different labs that are participating in exascale. Some companies have been to some of the labs. Some companies some of the representatives have never been to the labs just because their industry hasn't or their companies have never perhaps collaborated with the labs. So this is a really nice opportunity for them to get familiar with a lot of the user facilities and the large-scale tools that are available to companies. Our first meeting was really a kind of a baptism by fire for this team. It was in-depth briefings by all the focus area leaders in-depth briefing on the work breakdown structure. So they have to know this if they're going to be able to provide good advice. As David mentioned, we looked for companies and representatives who are comfortable looking at and dealing with budgets, R&D budgets and projects that are at the 9 to 10 figure level, because over time, that's what exascale is going to be. And I can tell you that when we had a session on the work breakdown structure, they really got into it. I think Paul can confirm that. There were a lot of discussions, a lot of interest. It's a very skilled group, and we're very fortunate to have that. A lot of interaction and feedback. And the outcome was really the initial feedback from them. They're very excited about the project. They feel it's very important for the country to do this, and they're quite committed to offering some time. More information, there's the exascaleproject.org website. It's not, by the way, it's not a .gov website, it's a .org. And you'll find a lot of information. The list of our advisory council is up there, the names of the people as well as the companies, the newsletter that Paul just mentioned. And really, if you haven't explored the website, I think it's very interesting for you. The goals of all the focus areas are up there, who the focus area leaders are, and many of the presentations that have been given around the country in different fora are there too. And then David and I are the co-executive directors of this. I think a lot of you know us, and we're always accessible via email, too. I think that's it. Any questions?
So I was a little surprised not to see like Boeing and Lockheed, who are beginning to do some work using high-performance computing in, to design, next generation aircraft and things like that. Are they participating in this? Or I know that they're working with NSF and their CREATE initiative. I wonder if that's a separate track and how much interaction there is between the two.
It's not a separate track. Boeing right now has decided not to. But they're going, the door is always open, and if they would like to, but for a variety of business reasons, they just felt that they did not have the time right now to do this, because this is a fair commitment of time. So they're, what we do is open, and they're certainly keeping up with what's going on with everything. We do have, of course, the jet engine manufacturers, though. We've got through the conglomerates, United Technologies with Michael McQuaid, who's the chair, and then of course GE is a member also. So the aerospace industry is not overlooked, and we have some of the ISVs that participate quite a bit with the aerospace industry. Anything else? Yes?
Yeah, primitive question. Is this the final set of members, or are you open over time to having more industrial firms join?
We could be. I mean, there's a limit to a committee that, you can't get it too big because it becomes unwieldy. And, but if there are other industries, for example, that aren't represented there, where they would like to participate at the senior executive level, which is what DOE has requested, we're certainly open to entertaining that, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I mean, you can see, for example, the banking industry is not there. And again, we had outreach to, some fairly senior CIO level executives in the banking community, and while they were very interested in the project and felt it was very important for the country, again, they felt that it wasn't quite in their space yet, and so they didn't want to, they felt they just didn't have the executive level time to address to it, and so they very politely declined. But we did have talks. But again, if you know, that's one sector where we don't have representation right now. Any other questions? So David and I are here, happy to answer any questions throughout the next couple of days if you'd like to. Thank you.
Thank you very much.